All right, welcome to the first Junior Golf Recruit Podcast, the show that covers everything regarding junior and college golf. I'm Peter Festi, and today we are discussing the U.S. National Development Program with Chris Zambri. Couldn't think of a better guest for our first podcast. I've known Chris for almost 10 years now.
Yeah,
He's been very gracious in so many ways, most notably in providing advice on college recruiting process, what college coaches are looking for and how they pick players. Chris's son Joey is a D1 golfer at Cal Poly, so he also understands what information is most important to junior players and parents. His advice has allowed me to build Junior Golf Recruit, providing the best of it, data available for junior players and college coaches. Most of all, I consider Chris a friend, and so let's get started.
yeah. Thanks for having me, Peter.
Thank you for joining us, Chris.
Yeah, and just to expand on that background, so we met when I was coaching at USC. We would come out and play at the golf club at Georgia,
Yeah,
and you and your son Matt would come out and watch when he was a little guy,
yeah,
and I think we even ran across each other in an airport
we
and
did.
once with the team, and that was cool. And we just become good friends over the years. And so, um, first of all, congratulations on all your work with Junior Golf Recruit,
Thank
and
you.
thank you for having me on this morning. This is great.
Yeah. All right, let's get started. So, launched by the USGA in early 2023, last fall, Chris was named as the first head coach of the U.S. National Development Program, officially starting his new role on November 1st. So, Chris, how did this role come to you?
Um, so I had started hearing some grumblings about this program that they were starting within the USGA, this national program about probably over 2 years ago. I had heard about it, and it sounded really interesting to me. At that point, I wasn't coaching at USC anymore, and I was probably at that point a volunteer assistant at Pepperdine, and working in some other ways in the golf business, and it just sounded really fascinating. And it's hard to believe that I'm actually in this role now because I really did look at it back then and say, "Gosh, I would love to do something like that." And so, um, someone I know named Scott Langley, who was a former tour player and works with the USGA now, a really great golfer and an even better person. He started doing some research for the. He was tasked with doing some research for the development program and talking to some coaches and trying to find out how and what it was like to coach somebody who was on a national team from another country, right? Since we've never had a national team in this country, it was about, did you have any Europeans or Australians or people from Asian countries who were part of national teams, and what was that like? And so I was one of the coaches he reached out to, and so I was ready for him when he called, and I expressed to him my big time interest in being part of the program, and then um, and gave him kind of my 2 cents on how, you know what it would have to be, what I thought it would have to be like to be a success, and what some of the pitfalls might be. And then we talked about the reason he was reaching out in the first place. But I did end the call with, please keep me in mind. And
Yeah.
so a job opened up. In the first job that opened up within the program that was put out to the public was for the development director, and I thought that sounded. I was thinking in terms of just strictly development of somebody's golf game, um, technically and tactically, I guess. And so I thought it was a good fit. It turned out that it really wasn't. It was for someone whose expertise in development was much broader than my kind of narrow scope of being just golf. And so, or certain parts of golf, I should say. And so they told me, when they told me to hit the bricks, they said, "Hey, bad news is we hired someone else, but the good news is we would like you to interview for the coaching job when it comes up." And so that was in probably March or April, and then the coaching job came open in like May, I think, and I put in my resume, and I was just really lucky and fortunate to get the job. And so I ended up starting They were really great to me and allowed me to start a little later than when it was decided that I was going to be the coach, which was in early September. And they allowed me to stick on with Pepperdine as their assistant through the competitive season, which was ended on October 31st. And I started the very next day with USGA. So it's just about 3 months now that I've been with them.
Great. And for those, let me show as well why part of why the USGA picked you, a little bit of your background. So associate head coach at Pepperdine for 3 or 4 seasons, 2021 national champion, 2020 national semifinal, head coach at USC for 14 seasons, I think. A 2015
Yeah.
national runner-up, which is actually that's after that runner-up is when I saw you in the airport, I think.
Oh, really? Oh, funny.
Yeah, I think you guys were flying. You'd flown back from. You're in Florida, I think,
Yeah, we were. We were
and
in Florida, then probably up to Atlanta,
you
and
were
then
coming up to Atlanta, and we were both going to LA, so we were on the same flight.
right, right.
2016 national semifinal, which actually I did some math on this. So 2015 to 2022 is 8 seasons, but if you take out the COVID season, that's 7 seasons. You were in 4 semifinals with 2 different teams over that period. That's unheard
Yeah,
of.
that's cool.
That's really
Well, it's the two-team part might be unheard of, but Mike Small would beg to differ on unheard of.
okay. Well, that might be true. I need to
Like
do more research on him, but
20 years in a row or some. It's not that long because match play's only been around since '08. But yeah, I think I've been part of a team that went to match play 8 times in the they started in '08, so 8 out of the maybe 14 years or 15 years, because one year it got canceled. And so I've just been really lucky, and really with Pepperdine, I played a very small role there. I came on as a volunteer assistant in 2021, and just happened to walk into an unbelievable situation with the deepest, maybe that one of the deepest teams I've ever seen in college golf, and yeah, and that was a magical year because they ended up winning national title that year. I should
yeah,
say we won. I was part of it. I was part
you
of
were
it,
part
but
of it.
I was just a small part of it. It was awesome though.
I've seen the team picture. You're a part of it.
Yeah.
We all watched it on the Golf Channel. We know what happened.
Yeah, I snuck in there for the
Um, while
pop.
you were at USC, 32 team championships, including 3 Pac-12s, 3 NCAA regionals, 30 individual champions, including 3 Pac-12s. I think 1 or 2 of those were actually Pac-10s, so they go back a
Yeah,
ways.
yeah, we won. I've only won one Pac-12. I won Pac. I won. The team won Pac-10s in '06, '07, and then um, in the 10-11 season we won the last Pac-10 ever played, which was at Stanford, and then we won it one more time when we were hosting in, I believe it was
2018.
Yeah, at Rolling Hills.
Okay. One NCAA individual champion, Jamie Lovemark. That was your first season, wasn't it?
Sure was. So another nice situation that I walked into, which was to, a really good team that had 2 players join the team who one of them would be the player of the year, and clearly a first team All-American. And the other one probably should have been some sort of All-American. And then they were both first team All-American the next year. And so I got the lucky horseshoe, I guess, because they were amazingly productive and got me going at a time when I could have used the help as a brand new coach.
Yeah. Let's finish this off. 2-time U.S. Open qualifier, 95 at Shinnecock Hills, 99 at Pinehurst. Going back to Pinehurst this year, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be fun.
6-year member of the Korn Ferry Tour. Played at USC as from 89 to 93 and 2-time all Pac-10 second team. So that's just part of the bio. A couple of notable players that you have out on tour: Justin Suh, Sean Crocker, Rico Hoey, Martin Trainer. So the
Yeah,
USGA,
usually when somebody goes through somebody's playing career, there's some money dollar figure attached to it, or like a ranking on the career money list, but not in my case. Not in my case.
yeah,
Uh, but it was I feel so fortunate that I got to try, and then I got 11 years of
that's
pursuit.
still, that's still pretty elite, though. I mean, the number of people that have played professional golf is and
Yeah,
qualify for U.S.
it's
Opens.
getting
So
even tougher. I know that, and I don't think anybody would argue that. But just to have 11 years of doing what all these players are trying to do that I'm now that I've coached and then I'm going to go on to coaches, which is to wake up every day with like this huge dream to make it in pro golf. And so to have lived that and to have been able to see great golf and be around great golf and know what it feels like to be in all these situations that young golfers will find themselves in if they end up moving closer to their goals is has been really helpful as a coach because there's a lot to be said to be able to talk to a young player and just kind of be able to empathize and understand what might be going through their body and their head. I've found that be a great way to connect and to establish some credibility that will allow us to trust each other and stuff. So as much as I certainly didn't dominate anything. At least I got out there and I got to see great players and I got to pursue it like a madman. Like you kind of have to, pursue it if you want to be great. You got to go all in. And so, anyways, that experience was really valuable.
well, and I've seen your teams at USC and Pepperdine when you guys were out here last fall, and I mean the players watching the interaction between you and the players love you. Um, you're one of the hardest working coaches I've seen. I was out there with your practice round last year, and I was amazed at how hard you work. So the USGA is really fortunate that they were able to get you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Well, we'll see. We'll see about that. I hope it works out. I think it
I
will.
think
I think we're
I
off
think
to a
it
nice.
will.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into more of what the U.S. National Development Program is. What are you responsible for overseeing?
So I'm responsible for coaching the team when we compete, helping to choose who's going to be on the team, developing curriculum for what we're going to work on and learn. Um, and so, and then helping train the players. I probably said that already. Um, and so that's, it's a lot. It's a lot like trying to figure out in a country this big, like who's going to be part of this group. It's not it's not easy, but there's a lot of resources out there that help inform what we're doing um, to make the right decisions on who will be part of this team, and then also to have some relationships within the golf industry um, that have been developed over the years, namely um, people in the manufacturing side and the what we call the AGAs or Allied Golf Associations, which would be, your in my case, I'm in Southern California, so the Southern California Golf Association, or the Northern California Golf Association, or you name it, every state's got one or two at least.
Yeah.
Just being able to lean on them for information about great young players in the area, but um, so we're actually along those lines about to put our first team together in the next month or so of probably 6 to 8 girls and 6 to 8 boys to be part of our first team. And so that's when to me that's when the fun starts for sure. I've been on this job now for close to 3 months, and I've officially worked with one player, and my idea of fun is working with players and
Yeah.
not necessarily doing a lot of meetings on Microsoft Teams, but I've done a couple hundred of those, it seems like, and there's been a lot of valuable work that we've done. But I just can't wait to be with young, talented, great golfers who want to be great, and just figure out how that we can help them. And that could be such a vast array of things that we might be involved with, and certainly, there's a lot of not trepidation. I don't think that's a good word, but there's a lot of care and concern with what we poke our nose into, and but on the flip side, I will say that these golfers that we're starting with are basically we're not including the 2024 class, so we're going to go after 2025, so juniors in high school and younger for this first group, and we're going to focus just on juniors for now, and as well as anyone plays at that age, there's just a lot to learn still about golf, and I mean, even the greatest of the great, Tiger Woods, if you ask Tiger right now at age 48, what he knows about golf compared to what he knew when he was 16, he would say about a million things. I know he would. I mean, and he doesn't know me from Adam, but I just know by paying close attention to just Tiger over the years, you can see that he has learned a lot about golf and how to become better. And so even though we don't want to poke our nose into too much with these young players, they do have things to learn, and my job and our job is going to be to figure out where there might be some gaps in either, maybe in some skill level or maybe just in their knowledge about all things golf, that we all end up, it takes time to learn them all. And Tiger might have learned stuff at 30 that maybe he wished he knew at 20 or that he knew at 18. And I think all golfers go through that where they learn something at a certain. I remember when I was 30, somebody taught me what the gear effect was, and I was just like, how did I not know hitting it off the heel causes the ball to do these weird things, or the toe, and like to be able to kind of layer in that information to a young person so that they can help themselves is part of what we're trying to do, and that's just one small example, but there's a lot to learn. And so as great as these kids are who are going to come into our program in a month and a half, as well as they play golf, they still have stuff to learn, and so we're hoping to weave in and out of their golf world and add something that might help them be better.
When you get these 6 or 8 together, are you putting them together in a single location for a couple of days, or working them?
Well, good question. So that's kind of what this whole 2.5 months or 3 months has been for me, is like, how are we going to do this in a way that really is impactful? That's not just we don't want to be just kind of like part of their growth. We want to make a difference. We don't like we could exist in a certain form that would bring people to competitions and allow them to get together every once in a while and push each other. But when in my time now, I've been able to be around or talk to some other federations and some really accomplished ones. Canada has been doing an amazing job in getting to hear the way they run things. I got to spend 4 days with the Swedish national team, which is an amazing coup for us to be granted that request to spend time. And so I spent 4 days with them in Florida for what they call their turkey camp. They've been doing for years and years. And for those who don't know, the way they operate over there is they get players in the program fairly youngish. They work with them until they leave for college, and then they all go to college in the U.S. And so it's not like some of these other federations, like Australia, for instance, will have a lot of 19, 20, 21-year-old amateurs who are living in Australia and just playing amateur golf prior to turning professional. In Sweden, it's part of the way that they're constructed is that when they graduate high school, they come to America and play golf, and then they'll run some camps over here for them. But long story short, what I learned is although they get together for these camps and they present some interesting things that are helpful, the real work was done, for 4 or 5 years in high school when they have 20 golf high schools in Sweden, and 18 are like state and 2 are national, and in each high school there's really high level coaching going on a almost daily basis. And so after seeing that, it kind of dawned on me that sure, it will be nice to teach these kids the gear effect, or how to big topics like how to pick targets in the greens, and all these things that you can layer into somebody's game that will make them better. But in the end, to make a real impact and to be able to look back in however many years and say, these are the things we did that help move things in a better direction for American golf. It's not going to be those one-off lessons at a camp. It's really going to be how do we immerse ourselves into their daily, weekly, monthly approach to becoming better golfers, and that's all taken with a huge grain of salt, which is that they have instructors and people in their lives, but we hope to be able to be part of it also, and to collaborate with them, and hopefully, like I said, make a difference, not just kind of be something that was fun to do and a good time, but something where they look back and say that was really helpful.
Well, and you mentioned Sweden. We tracked for the 2024 class. We've got 1,500 kids in our system for NLIs for boys and girls. And Sweden ranks 4th in countries for going to play college golf. They're
crazy, and they just
behind UK and Canada, I think. So obviously the US. So
that's a small country.
Yeah,
and half of it's like ungolfable. The northern part of it you don't even play in. So there's a couple things about that are really interesting. Is number one, kudos to them that they've created a program that turns out a lot of great players from not a big area and not a big population base. I think there are 10 million people in a state the size of, Connecticut or something like that. And so, but that, it's also part of the reason why they've had such an impact is because they are small enough to be within a few hours drive of every golfer in their country who's part of their program. And so,
yeah, the golf camp you said you went to, that was in Florida.
It was
Swedish national team, but in Florida.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They came here. It was a camp for their college players. So I think they had 2 players they brought over from Sweden, one of which was a high school aged player who will be playing next year at a prominent school in the ACC. And then another one was just an amateur who hadn't come over to play college golf, but every other kid was a college golfer. But so they are a small place and they have turned out tons of great golfers per capita. But on the flip side, they've been in an environment where they can make a difference, right? And so that's been what I learned from there is that how do we become part of their golf life more than just a few competitions a year and a few training camps? Like those are things we have planned, and those are going to be some things that are fun and interesting, and there'll be competition, but I don't think we can move the needle the way we want to with just that. And after being at the Swedish camp and learning about their high school system, that's to me was like the big moment when things changed for me, where I started to feel like, oh, okay, now I know what we have to do to make this work. And so that's what we've been doing now, is trying to figure out or trying to develop our plan to be part of their golfing life, even though we're spread out all over the country. We don't have any plans there's not going to be any golf high schools. There's not going to be any remote training centers where the kids live, like in some other countries. So we're going to, we need to come up with a plan that will allow us to be involved, even though we're going to be spread out quite a bit.
And how about, I know you and I talked briefly about this in Las Vegas last month. The kind of relationship of a kid having their own coach at home. They've had one maybe for a couple of years. That relationship versus, and a lot of times kids are picking a coach that's close to their house or in their metro area or what have you. Versus, is there any plans for you on a national level to get some of the best coaches in the country, some that are maybe with professionals or what have you, to get them involved, or
Um,
does it conflict with the teaching?
no, no, our plan is to collaborate with the coaches that they have. And, what I know it's something we were maybe going to talk about on on our podcast today, which was about my time at USC and like the tests we developed.
Yeah,
And I developed those. I developed skills tests that just measured different skill sets in golf, getting it online, knowing your yardages, a whole bunch of different stuff, and trying to take all the things that go into great golf and find a way to test them off the golf course. And so, one thing that those things allowed me to do, those tests and those results, is to have the kind of conversations that were necessary when a player, and a couple of things, when a player was doing something really well, is to inform them that they're doing things at a really high level and they should be really careful about whatever they do going forward with that particular part of their game. And sometimes it's hard to see how well you do something, right? Because you have a certain expectation level that might be pretty high, and so you hold yourself to a standard that's incredibly high if you're good at something, and to the point where you might slip just a little for just a small amount of time, and then do something fairly drastic, and maybe take something that works and ruin it, which is like a tragedy in golf because it's hard enough to find it once, right? And then the other thing we were able to do is when kids were doing things and had parts of their games that really needed some work, we were able to kind of present a case for it that was a lot less judgmental and just kind of data based. And
yeah,
so I see what we're going to be able to do as far as collaboration with these players and their professionals is just provide feedback on where they are, and kind of help be part of a plan going forward to either protect things or make things better, And so I think in that way, I think we'll be able to do a lot of really great collaboration with PJ pros or teaching pros that are part of these kids' lives, and really come together to make the player better. And it certainly have no intent of replacing instructors with other instructors. What we might find with some players is that they don't have an instructor, or
yeah.
they get lessons on their golf swing a lot, but maybe they don't get any lessons with short game, and so part of it might be pointing them in the right direction in that sense. But our goal is to work within their ecosystem, and just provide additional feedback and help.
Well, and tell me, I've seen this a lot of juniors at our club that have, when it comes to lessons, they kind of have a backwards approach to me, in my mind, of, they have a tournament coming up, on the weekend, and they're practicing that week, and they obviously want to play well that weekend. And by Wednesday or Thursday, they don't think their swing is where they want it to be. And so they schedule an immediate lesson on Thursday or Friday with their coach,
Yeah, yeah,
learn something, and then think that by Saturday morning, magically, this is all going to be ingrained in their swing. And they usually end up playing worse in that tournament than they did if they
yeah.
just stuck with what they had that week.
That sounds like my college career right there. Like showing up, feeling lost, getting desperate. So those are things we'd like to help them with too, is just to understand where the parts of their games are. And you're going to have times when you do things, even if you do things well, you might not have confidence in it. And that's when, people make wrong decisions, and all of a sudden they're breaking something down that's the least of their worries, and
Yeah.
whether it be ball striking or with their putting strokes or something. But A lot of what those tests were really performance-based stuff. And so,
Can you describe one of the, just like do the iron, just describe briefly the iron test that you
yeah.
teach?
Okay. So we had three tests we developed that were about getting the ball online. And the most common of those tests was a test we used to call a 6 to 9, which stood for 6 iron to 9 iron. And the format of the test was we would pick a target in the distance. And we started doing this before TrackMan. So we would pick a target line to hit on. And then at times I would be out in the field on the target line, and then they would start hitting, and I would just pace. So they would, like I said, it was a 140 to 190. So we would say, what club do you carry closest to 190 yards? And they'd say 6 iron. And I'd say, okay, we're going to use clubs 9, 8, 7, and 6 for this test. And we're going to hit 20 shots total, not with each club, but total. So 5 shots with each club, and not in order. We're going to go 9, 8, 7, 6, 9, 8, 7, 6, not 5 9s in a row, 5 8s in a row. And we're simply going to measure how many yards the ball lands offline. So we established that the ball is going to fly a certain yardage because you told us your 6 iron flies close to 190. There are going to be times when you miss hit one and it goes shorter, but generally they didn't miss hit them so often that we had to alter the scoring too much. But wherever the ball landed in relation to the line was their score in yards. And the way we did the test is after the 20 shots, we would add up all the yards and we would throw out the worst 2 scores or the worst 2 shots. And then their score would be the 18 best shots. And so we started doing that in 2009 and 2009 at USC, and then kept doing it all the way through the time I left there, which was in 2020. And so what ended up happening is we were sitting on just a ton of data, and data told us I learned a lot, just so much about golf from doing the test, and about probability and dispersion and all these things that are big topics of discussion in golf these days, especially when it comes to course management. But what I learned was, what first jumped off the page at me was that all the guys in my lineup were the ones getting the lowest scores. I thought that was interesting. And turned out I learned, one humongous piece of information, which is, the single biggest determining factor that I found for success was people who can get the ball online with their full swing. And we hit, we even developed another test that was 140 to 235 yards.
Yeah.
And which is a really big test. But, it went even further in determining who our lineup was, and not always, but in general, if you can hit a 4-iron solidly and straight and online, or a 3-iron, most of those same people drive it pretty well. Not all of them. It's not an automatic, but it just turned out that the test identified our best players. And so that test became really meaningful to me, just by virtue of the connection between scoring well on it and playing good golf. We never used it to pick our team. We had normal qualifyings, but every once in a while we would use it in some ways where kids could get bonus strokes off their score for putting up a really good score. So anyways, that's an idea. That's just to give you an idea of what we did. That's one of the tests that we do, this line test. And my intention as the coach of this national program is to incorporate these tests into what we do, because they really, believe it or not, better than even on course data, they inform me where a long game is, or where other parts of the game is, where somebody's ability to control yardage is, and there's just a lot of reasons the tests are valuable, because they're done exactly the same way every time, whereas on-course data is highly dependent on the golf course and pin placements, and there's all these things that, even though strokes gained is the best we got right now, it's not perfect.
Well, that's also based off of where the ball ends up, so if there's
right, not where it
on the
lands.
green and yours is based purely on where does that ball land.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's another thing I'm seeing is that a lot of companies are developing some tests of their own, and they're using PGA Tour strokes gained proximity information. And one thing I found is that um, surprisingly, like my college players' data when it comes to landing the ball is a lot more precise than the tour's data of where the ball ends up.
Yeah,
And by no means am I saying that college players are better than pros. That's not my point. My point is that like we did all these tests with no wind pretty much, and
yeah,
we did all these tests with the flag as the target. Whereas,
yeah,
on a round of golf, a lot of times you're not aiming at the flag at all, right? And
right.
so you're judged on your proximity to a target you weren't even aiming at. And so it just turns out that if you use the proximity data in the end, you'll look to be a better ball striker than you're capable of, right? Because if you just did math on proximity and you said, okay, well, you're doing a 20-shot test, we'll take the 18 best. Your good score should be around a 90, and well, it's like, well, no, it's a 50 actually, 50 yards offline. And so it's an interesting phenomena that it just to me it's this insight into like data can be so helpful if you use it the right way, but if you don't, it could misinform. You know,
Who had the
um,
best score when you were at USC?
Rico Hoey. Rico Hoey was the a freakish ball striker, especially at getting the ball on line, and he pretty much has the record or is tied for the record in every line test we have, and so on that what I mean, this score is so freakish. It was done indoors in a simulator, but from 140 to 235, and that test is basically, 9 to 6 iron and and 2 iron to 5 iron in two different and you just kind of hit one out of each category zigzagging, right? So you'll go 9 iron, 5 iron, 8 iron, 4 iron, hitting at a target line. It's a 20-shot test with shots flying upwards of 235 yards. And Rico got a 43, and that's no throw out. So the 20, we call it the extreme line, no throwouts. So for 20 shots that were flying upwards of 235, he averaged less than or barely over 2 yards offline per shot. It's crazy. It's such a crazy score, and I don't even like to talk about it that much because I don't want people because a good score in that test is about 115 or 120, but when you tell a young player the record is this, they think that should be their goal. When he did a lot of tests. I mean, to give you a better insight into what super high level looked like, he averaged for one season like a 95 on the test, and that was unbelievable average. But he did one time get a 43.
Jeez.
Crazy.
Do you think kids can get complacent sometimes on the driving range? In two capacities. One is driving ranges can be 60, 70, 100, 150 yards wide. And you,
I
there might
think
be
they can
targets
get.
out there and they say, I was aiming at that target and I was close to the pin and
Yeah, I
versus
think they can get. I think
quantifying
that
and testing.
there's a lot of. I just there's so much about a range just in the normal way or the traditional way people practice that's misleading, and I don't know if the word's complacent. I don't complacent kind of
Misleading, yeah.
yeah, complacent is like they have other ways of doing it, but they choose this way. They don't really usually don't have other ways of practicing other than just they dump a bucket or two, they go through the bag, they hit at targets usually, hopefully they hit every ball at a target especially after warming up. But there's really you know if you're looking to make a change, you can look back on the session and say, what about those bad ones? And if you're looking to find confidence in what you're doing, you're going to look back on the session and go, well, what about those good ones? And that's what turned out this testing kind of helped us with is being able to quantify the performance and I can't imagine any other way of doing it now, quite frankly. Like I think I could walk on a range and watch somebody hit balls and be like, wow, they look pretty good, or they don't look like they're good enough. But I never feel like I would know for sure unless I got to run a test on them and really measure. I mean, there's so many people in golf who look great, and it turns out that they don't necessarily have as much control as you would think, because you can get there's a lot of biases kicking. You watch somebody hitting balls, they're flushing it, or they're hitting it really hard, or really high, or whatever. You pick a bias that a lot of us have, and but in the end, like I have a strong bias now towards performance and the data they put up, and to me that trumps anything that I really see with my eyes.
Good, good. Um, let's switch gears for a second. So the U.S. National Development Program has 6 pillars. You want to talk about those?
Sure, sure. Can you
Let
can
me,
you prompt me on each one, and
yeah,
I should know them by heart, but I don't at this point.
that's all right. Let me get,
I probably could name them if put to
no
the.
prompt. Let me get on the screen, then I'll prompt you with them. Okay, first one, talent identification.
Sure. So talent identification is a lot of what we're doing right now, in kind of on multiple fronts, but trying to figure out who these players are, these young players that we need to bring into the program. And I mean, I guess like the first thing that I would say is, the point of every single bit of this and why we're even in existence is so that we can help American golfers be better as professionals. That's our goal, is to ensure that American golf is a leader in the world when it comes to competing and winning, and and it seems like there would be a lot of folks who would be under the impression that that's exactly what's happening, but it's not necessarily, and especially on the women's side right now. And so our goal is to do what all these other countries have done, and to do what every other sport in the major sport in the U.S. has done, which is to start a national program and to try to instead of just saying, hey, we got a huge country and a lot of golfers, and we're bound to turn out a bunch of good players. We want to help ensure that happens, and that um, certainly some of the trends are pointing towards the fact that we are not the leaders in certain areas anymore, and so that's our goal. And so these 6 pillars, everything leads to, well, how do we, what's our point? Our point is to ensure that American golf stays a leader and dominates at a professional level. That's what we want to do, and that's why we've been brought into existence. So with that, identifying the players, it's not. There's going to be players who slip through the cracks that we just don't hear about. I don't think there's as many as some people might think out there.
Yeah,
It's in order to really show that you are a great golfer, you need to be in a tournament and play well. Like
yeah,
anything short of that, as Bobby Jones said, there's golf and tournament golf, and they're not the same. And so anything short of being in a tournament and playing well doesn't qualify you as a great golfer. And so, the fact that there's a lot of tournaments, and not everybody has the same access, and that's a big issue that we're trying to address also with our grant program. But regardless of how getting into tournaments can be not as easy for some as others, it has to be the way that we determine how well a golfer plays, right? And so what we're trying to do is find the best players. And then another thing we're doing that's going to make this a lot more doable across 50 states and this huge country we live in is we're starting a state team program We introduced the program a couple weeks ago. We have 7 states who are in our first pilot program for the next year, and our goal is to have every state in the country with a state team. And so um, now we're going to kind of be able to spread out a little bit and use the expertise of our allied golf associations and the PGA of America to help us identify these players in maybe some states that don't traditionally turn out great players. And so that's another way that we're going to identify talent. And so that's talent ID. National teams is pretty self-explanatory, although there are some details we haven't talked about. We're going to have a junior national team that will start at 6 to 8, but it'll probably grow closer to 30 on the boys and girls side. And then we'll eventually start a high-level national amateur program, which will be, I believe, around 15 and 15 players in the high-level amateur program. And then we'll also have a high-level professional or a young professional program. And so our ages will run from about 13 to 24 in the program. And so, and they'll be on national teams, and national teams will include things we talked about earlier, which are like training sessions and competitions. And our big job is to start creating competitions that we can be a part of and compete. There's so many countries have national teams, and there's so much in place already where they are competing, especially in the summertime. And so we need to develop an opportunity to compete for these teams that we're naming. And then athlete resources is really, I tend to do that too, is talk a lot about just the technical golf side. But there's so much more that goes into being a great golfer in terms of training, whether it be in mental skill, on what's commonly called sports psychology, or diet, or getting your body in shape. And so we hope to provide our athletes with some resources that maybe they can't afford, or maybe they just haven't gotten to. We talked to a really high level junior, and their interest was the 2 big things they had were diet and physical training. And so, if you look at all the professionals now, the ones who are having a lot of success, they seem to be covering every base and turning over every rock. And so we're going to provide them with those kinds of services so that we are getting as much as we can, or providing as much as we can for them to reach their goals of being a successful pro.
On that note, I think too, if you ask around your local golf course or wherever you play, you can typically find somebody, another junior or maybe a kid that plays in college, and say, who are you getting lessons from? And you can find a swing instructor that way. But I don't know that anybody asks, what sports psychologist are you seeing? Or is there's somebody in our area, or even on the training side? My son who played a couple of years in D1, we got him in training when he was 15, I think. And it wasn't as much to get him stronger as much as he was so flexible that the club was going farther than it needed to be. And the first thing they worked on was just getting the club to stop in an appropriate spot every time. And there's much more in golf specific training now than there was.
I know. On the physical side, it's crazy how it's, and then there's, and then there's the speed training that's become really popular now. But there's all these things that if you were to take the top 20 players in the world and ask them to describe their team, there would be a lot of folks involved. And so if that's what it takes, then that's what we want to provide.
Let me go back to two on talent identification real quick. So earlier you said right now you're just getting juniors from the 2025 class and younger, but eventually this is going to be juniors, amateurs, young professionals. Is that correct?
Sure.
And then on the national teams, the USGA has the Walker Cup and the Curtis Cup. And I guess juniors, if they were good enough, they could play on those teams. Are there going to be junior teams that are equivalent to those,
Well, you know,
or don't know?
that's no, it's a great question. I think there already are, right? We have a junior Ryder Cup team that plays, I think, every 2 years. We have junior Solheim Cup teams. Right now, those are not something that those are run by PGA of America, and then there's thing like competitions. I think there's a competition in Japan, and I think it might be the GCAA or the HAGA that brings people over, and so we're just going to have to figure out, um, you know, how we're going to create places to compete. And then you bring up the Walker Cup and Curtis Cup. I think that over time, especially when we are around for a longer period of time, that we will become a stronger resource when it comes to those teams, as far as just knowing more about the landscape and who they already do a heck of a job picking these teams, but we will be in the trenches a while. We'll be bringing kids up through our program from ages 13, 14, all the way through college. And so I would foresee a time in the future where we will have maybe more involvement in both those competitions. Brings up an interesting point, like, just another one-off of things we might be able to provide in this program is, we get crushed as a country in alternate shot, or what's also called foursomes, and
Yes.
and maybe we can start incorporating more of that into our practice at a younger age, so that, especially when we're together, it's pretty hard to play foursomes by yourself, but
Yeah.
but but if when together, to one of the things I saw at the Swedish camp was they had a lot of team stuff going on where they would pair players together, and they had a really strong conviction that doing that raised the stakes considerably in the minds of the players. And so, which also is a little maybe insight into you know why we may struggle in that. I mean, I think we struggle just because of a lack of experience in that format, but there might be other things, and they probably fall under the heading of experience. But um, that would be nice if we could stop spotting teams 3 out of 4 points every time we play.
Especially when they go to Europe, right?
Yeah, especially when they're in Europe. One thing I learned by talking with the English coach is that they play a ton of alternate shot or foursomes in England, like a lot. It's not everywhere that they do it, but in England they play it all the time throughout their whole young life. When they're doing anything as a team, they don't play like what we call best ball. They don't play four ball. They play foursomes, which is alternate shot. So
Yeah. We'll keep going through the list. I just took it down, but let's see, access to competition was the next one, I think.
no, we talked about that. What was the one
Did that
after that?
one. Um, so that's you're gonna have state teams, and then does the grants fall under that category of access to competition?
Yeah, partially, right. So
Or that's financial support.
part of that will be our grant program. And so we started a grant program, which is an amazing program that's allowed junior golfers and their families from all over the country to submit information. Uh, it's a need-based grant, so it's not simply open to anybody who plays golf. We will be providing um, resources for all the players, but the grant program is specifically for families who need a little more help in exposing their junior golfer to the kind of things necessary to make a run at this. You need to be able to go play in competition, but you also need access to facilities, and you might need money to pay for golf lessons. And so we had a fair number of kids submit a grant application, and those applications have closed, and we'll be evaluating those in February and then awarding the grants, I believe, end of February, early March. And so that's just another way that we're looking to kind of grow the pipeline, but also provide opportunity for talented young players to have a chance. You know, it's not for any player. You know, there's still a high level of skill that's required to be part of the grant program. We set the parameters at the same handicap level it takes to try to qualify for the U.S. Junior and the U.S. Junior girls, and so we're not taking any old player, but we're taking players who've already shown a capacity to be great, and who might need a little help to get over the top when it comes to being able to make a go at it. That's
Okay.
exciting.
Yeah. I think the other one, number 5, was player development and relations.
Player development is, and that's along the lines of what we talked about earlier, which is, you know, all the ways we're going to try to help them get better. You know, and you know, the idea right now is you know, this concept of skills testing. I think it really works, especially if you can help educate folks in what the scores mean and the importance of you know, anybody in golf knows that if you told me somebody shoots 68 a lot, I would know that's good. Especially if you also gave me important information like what's the course rating? Oh, it's course rated 74 and they shoot a lot of 68. So it'd be like, okay, I know. But there's a lot of other ways to measure high level skill, and so our goal is to roll out this form of practice and this form of skill development in a way that will allow players, young people around the country who aren't just on our teams or on the high level part of the program, but in the grant program, in the state team program, and even junior golfers who have no connection whatsoever yet to the USNDP. We want to provide them the opportunity to do the same things we'll be doing with the national team, and to kind of compare themselves in different skill areas, and then also ideally be able to allow them to do that and have the information get back to us, which would be really cool.
Yeah.
If there was a kid in, you name the state, who was putting up 100 on the 140 to 235, that would be someone I'd want to know about, you know. And so we're gonna try to create, using technology and partners, the ability for that to happen too, which is really, really exciting to me. I mean, it's like a dream come true, actually, to have my tests being done by
Yeah.
every kids all over the country is like nirvana. But and then what was the last one on the list?
Last one was athletic financial support.
Yeah, we talked about that in terms
Yeah.
of grants and stuff. So yeah, we've been working on all of that, and you know, I'm really fortunate to work with really smart people. My boss is a woman named Heather Daly Donofrio, who was a LPGA Tour player and winner, and a longtime executive with the LPGA Tour. Really smart person, who's got a great broad perspective, and you know, I'm learning a lot because I tend to get a little focused on certain parts of the game, and you know, they're doing Heather and this woman named Dr. Beth Brown, who's like my closest co-worker. You know, she got the development job I talked about earlier, and she's just doing an amazing job making sure that we are having a broad vision and bringing and you know, they'd say widening the pipeline, and not just you know, we have strength in numbers, and we should be using those numbers, you know, which is the fact that there's a lot of young people playing golf. And if we can have an effect on everyone, not just the most elite at age 16, or 19. But if we can provide something to everyone that might help raise the level of American golf, because really broadening the bottom part is how we're going to also accomplish our goals, not just
Well,
sharpening better players at
yeah, and to
17.
that note, regarding the first player or first pillar, talent identification. So, the U.S. has about 9,000 boys and about 3,000 girls playing junior golf right now. So, how do you identify which players will be in the program?
Yeah,
12,000 to choose from.
great question. So we're relying on rankings. We're relying on word of mouth. We're relying on what we see and what we scout ourselves. We're probably going to rely more on the rankings this time than any other time going forward, just because we're going to be more involved in the information pipelines that we're developing to hear about these great players all over the country are growing. And so, but I've always, I'm a former college golf coach, and I'm also a lover of the book Moneyball. And so um, I believe in algorithms a lot. I there's a famous uh, psychologist named Daniel Kahneman. He's done a lot of work on making decisions, and he talks about how the most simple of algorithms will beat human decision making at any time. And so I really do like rankings, and I think that there's a lot of good ones out there, and I think as being a way to predict, well, first of all, a way to um, order the players who are out there, and then also kind of being able to predict future success. I think it's a great place to start. And so I think our initial team will be pretty heavy on ranking, um, and certainly if you're thinking of like 8 players, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer who maybe the 4 or 5 or even 6 of them are.
Yeah.
And at least it is in my mind. I'll be working closely with my boss Heather on choosing this team. But I do know that my background in as a college golf coach is to lean heavily on those rankings as places to start, especially, and they tend to be pretty good at identifiers of future success. And so that's
And
kind of where.
even with your coaching background, though, you were evaluating kids, seventh, eighth, ninth grade,
Yeah,
like college
we,
golf. So this isn't too far off that, is it?
no, it's right in line with it. You know, the big question is are there players out there that no one's heard of who are really, really great? And it's interesting. I bet if I, went through all the years that I was involved in college golf, I'm sure that there was a decent amount of those, but not. I can't think of too many off the top of my head. That were complete hidden gems.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think by virtue of this program, we will start. If there are players out there like that, we'll be able to start identifying them. But I don't know. It's hard to to take someone who's ranked fourth in overall in the country and find somebody who's maybe not even ranked or is ranked 480th and somehow justify one person over another. And then what ends up happening inevitably is if I dive deeper into their scores in tournaments, I never open a ranking in like 480 that has a bunch of red and is putting up scores that are similar to somebody ranked fourth. I've never once done that. And so
Yeah.
I keep looking for that, because then I would be like, well, gosh, there's something going on that's weird here, because this person is shooting the same scores. They're ranked 480th. this person's ranked fourth, but it's never that way. You know, they're pretty accurate. Like, okay, we had some rankings that spit out after the first semester of college golf. You know, it was at the top of the rankings on the men's side. This guy named Nick Dunlop, you know, just won a tour event. Nick Dunlop. Like, the rankings work, you know.
Yeah, I don't think Nick Dunlop slid under the radar on anybody.
No, he didn't.
You know, going back to the difference between a number 4 player and number 400 player too, though, that I've seen in looking at tens of thousands of junior scores is, and this is important, I think, for junior players to consider, is it may seem like there's a gigantic gap between you. And in some cases, it is between the number 1 player and the number 400th player. It might be 7, 8, 9 shots around, but 400 to 100 can just be one less shot per nine. I mean, or one less shot per round. It's not as monumental as I think they think it is, or so just a little bit more diligence in their practice and their strategy.
Yeah, a hard work, great information. I mean, if there's anything that I love about this sport, I love the notion that someone could be 15 years old and a 7 handicap and end up being one of the best players in the world when they're 21. You know, that's so cool.
Yeah.
It's not a sport that's really, and that also makes it hard to pick the best players. It's not a sport that, you know, your physical gifts necessarily determine your lot. You know, like if you're going to be a basketball player and you're not really tall, you don't have much of a chance.
Yeah.
But we have golfers making it in golf who are, you know, on both the men's and women's side, from anywhere to 4'10" to 6'10", and that's why it's not as predictive, right? Because if it were just, you know, who could run really, really fast, we could say, well, what's their time at age 13 on the 100-meter, and I can extrapolate out just based on how humans grow and how they get stronger and tend to get faster as they get up a certain age until they start moving the other way. But golf doesn't work that way. And so we'll always have people who, you know, this program, long after I'm gone, we'll have people who weren't part of our program who emerge as being really, really great. But that's just the beauty of golf, is that it's not you know, there's such an array of skills necessary to be great at it that you know, you can make it with not what everyone would consider the most elite physical talent. You know, you don't have to hit it as far as Dustin Johnson to make it. It just really, really helps.
Yeah. Well, there's a kid, you know, in our area in Atlanta, Christo Lamprecht at Georgia Tech. He's 6'10", I think. I've seen him play in person a couple of times. He doesn't even take a full swing.
I know. But his club's moving about twice as far as everybody else's, even though he's taking a short swing.
I've never heard a golf ball the way
it's crazy.
Yeah, Matthew played a qualifier with him a couple of years ago, and I was caddying for Matthew, and so I heard it for 18 holes, and it was just unlike anything. They were on the driving range, and I heard Christo a couple places down to the right hitting drivers, and I'm like, I've never. Yeah, I've gone to PGA Tour events and what have you. I've never heard anybody hit the ball like that.
Didn't he hit one recently in a tournament in South Africa that went like 450 yards or something on the last hole of the tournament.
And yet, if you look at the swing, it didn't look like he was.
I know,
more than 250.
There must have been some wind, but still, it's crazy.
I don't know. He can get it out there a little ways. How does a kid, other than so I guess rankings in the short term, but how does a kid get on the radar of the USNDP?
Well, I think getting on the radar certainly includes, first of all, you got to play tournament golf. I don't see any other way to get on the radar, even if it's just local tournament golf. Any place you can play, and high school golf for that matter, where you're teeing it up and keeping score, and the score is getting recorded and hopefully published somewhere, is the way to get on our radar. It pretty much starts with that. Like I said, the state program will get built out to the point where we'll be able to hear about players in states that traditionally maybe we wouldn't hear about, like a player in Wyoming or a player in South Dakota, that might end up being really, really great, but just hasn't traveled enough out of the state. And that would be those exceptions, right? Um, Although, like I said, what's always been interesting is I just haven't, even when you find somebody ranked down there, when I open their scores, they still, the scores need to get better most of the time. If the ranking's not high, usually the scores aren't low. Or so, but playing in tournaments, playing, you know, locally and as much as possible. You can also send us a resume, um, and I can help get you there if you're interested. We're hoping everybody, when they send their resume, they send it in the format that we provide, so that every resume for us, we can judge everybody on the exact same stuff. And if you don't mind, I'll let them know. You know,
Yeah, go ahead.
if you're on Google, you simply type in USGA, or into your USGA.org, into your address box. Then once you get on there, choose championships, and then on the drop down championship, slide all the way over to the right. You'll see something called U.S. National Development Program, and then once you open up USNDP resources is something you'll find if you scroll down a little. And then once you open that up, you'll see there's a spot for golf resume, and it's a form that you can fill out on your computer, and that will go straight to our USNDP inbox. And that's another way to get on our radar. Um,
And should it only be kids 2025 and younger, or anybody else?
yeah, pretty much right now. Our grant, the folks who signed up for the grants could actually be 24s. But the going forward, in terms of being part of the national team, it will be 25s and younger.
Okay. Kind of
Yeah.
build from there.
Yep.
What's the how long do you anticipate before kind of this program is making an impact on US golf
I,
player
you know,
performance?
I
It's
think
a
it's so
hard
much. Go ahead.
it's kind of a hard that's a tricky question for me to ask you, but
Yeah, no, I get it though. There's a couple ways to look at it. I don't think that I mean, it seems like what's a good performance indicator for what we're doing. Um, Maybe in a long term to look at it that way, which would be, yeah, how many players, there's a handful. There's Wagger on both the men's and women's side, and how many folks in the top 25, how many folks are in the top 100. There's official world rankings, and the Rolex rankings for women, and that's players in the top 100, players in the top 200. Those are probably going to be the benchmarks that in the end will define our success.
and to
But I
that,
think
that note too, though, the men's side across professional, 48 out of the top 100, Wagger 55 of the top 100. Certainly Nick Dunlap played fairly well last weekend. Seemed
yeah,
like pretty good. On the women's side, on the professional Rolex, 14 out of the top 100, 32 out of the top 100 in Wagger. So what do you think is causing the difference in U.S. golf between men and women?
um, I'm not sure yet. I'm I know that I feel strongly, actually. I'm not sure of all of it, but one thing I would suggest for sure is that those federations help. They're doing a lot of like, um, they're providing a lot of assistance in other countries and helping young women become better at golf. And um, I've got some theories I'm working on here, but I think we can make a difference, and I think we can make a difference short term, and it might not be measurable, but I look forward to seeing these initial 8 players on our team, and getting to work with them and find places in their game that they can improve, and you know, probably not the biggest holes to find in people who are ranked in the top 8, but going back to what I said a while ago on this, which was Tiger Woods learned a lot about golf since he was 16. And when he was 16, he was the best player by far. You know, he was in the middle of winning 3 U.S. juniors in a row prior to winning 3 U.S. amateurs in a row. And he
Yeah.
still had a lot to learn. And so I think we can start making progress early. It's just a matter of, you know, what would those measurables look like? I think that'll take some time. But I don't know. There's definitely, it was funny, a story when I was with the Swedish coaches during that trip. You know, we ended up going. I went over to their house where they had meals, and I sat down to have a meal. And as soon as I sat down, the coaches sat down, and one coach showed up with his laptop and just, and they're big data people too. And so he just opened it up and said, "We don't get it. Why are you guys even doing this? This is where you are on the men's side. This is where you are on the women's side." And certainly the story on the women's side, it to me is, it certainly needs to get better, and it can get better, and it will get better. But even on the men's side, it's like, regardless of where we are now, it's a question of, you know, how much, you know, we're pretty big. We're a big country. We have a lot of golfers. Like, we should be doing really well, and why wouldn't we want to do better? You know, like, which great player, even a top 5 player, hasn't at the end of the year sat down with people who are in their on their team or in their life and said, well, how am I going to get better? How am I going to get better?
Yeah.
And so regardless of what we're doing now, we could do better. You know, if there's, and who knows how that's going to be, and what it's going to entail, because everybody needs something different, and we're going to figure it out as we go. But I have had a lot of experience playing or coaching young, really good players, and I've never met one that didn't have a spot in their game that couldn't have improved. You know,
Yeah.
and so that's our goal, is to help. You know, help them. Maybe they learn how to pick targets into greens at age 17 rather than age 27. You know, and maybe
Yeah.
that'll be the biggest. You know, how many golfers fell to the wayside because they were unbelievably talented in 23 and 24, and they went at every pin, and consequently they made an extra bogey and a half a round, and then consequently they didn't make it in golf. You know,
Yeah.
like I hear stories all the time through my association with Decade about guys who play professional golf who are pin hunters, and they've never played any other way. And then the other thing you hear a lot of about is people who want to play smart, who play at the middle of the green all the time, and that hurts them too, because they're being too conservative. And so there's just a lot of ways to make a difference. And you know, we're going to explore all those ways, and try to kind of find a way to add to something good that's already happening with somebody. Clearly, if they're on our team, they're already doing some good stuff, but there's so much to learn.
Yeah. No, and there's it's a great story I have from Matthew's past, when he was I think it was after his junior year in high school, and he's playing in the Southern Amateur. They were up in Lexington, Kentucky, at Idle Hour. Really, 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 really difficult course. And he and another kid from Georgia they played a practice round. They played the first 2 rounds, and the course just beat him up. And we were talking to him after the round, and this other kid was just um, talking about how, you know, even with a 4-iron, you know, and that week every pin was maybe 3 yards off of edges,
Mm.
with 4-inch bluegrass rough and what have you. And he was just firing at every single pin. And so we talked about it afterwards, and I said, you know, depending on what club you have in your hand, if you got a wedge, you might be able to go after some, but if you got a 4-iron, you got to play a little bit differently. Well, fast forward a week, we come back to Georgia, and they're playing in the Georgia Junior over at Augusta Country Club, and the same kid goes out and shoots 11 under, wins the Georgia Junior.
Wow.
And just a little bit different. Uh,
Yeah.
it
I mean, if
change
you,
didn't change his swing at all. He was still
right.
hitting the same way, just picked a little bit different target. So
Yeah, that's so, there's just so many things that can derail somebody's golfing life. um, and that's a biggie, but that's just one of them. It
Yeah.
could be a number of things that they're not doing right that's getting in the way of, and that's kind of the whole story behind Decade with Scott Fawcett and Will
Yeah.
Zalatoris, this
That
unbelievably
was,
talented young player. And it was very similar story, not really beating people much at all. He was going to go to Wake Forest, but he had kind of fallen off the radar. And then somehow Scott and him got together because they were at the same club, and he turns around and wins Texas State Am, and then turns around and wins the U.S. Junior.
yeah.
And it was simply just picking new targets.
Well, and it was Decade that we talked about when we were up in
Oh,
Kentucky.
cool. Yeah.
Uh, and the interesting part was I'd asked him just curiously. I said, let's say you have a 4-iron. I go, how do you know? How do you determine when you're going after a pin and not going after a pin? He goes, if I'm feeling it, I go after the pin. I go,
Yeah.
how
Nice.
how accurate are you?
That's like I think that's the exact story for about 10,000 people who've lost all their money in Las Vegas. When I'm feeling it,
Let it ride. Yep.
yeah, let it ride because I was feeling it.
No, I like data is a big deal in golf.
Yeah, it's
Um,
growing too. It's getting
all right,
bigger and bigger.
one question. I've talked to a lot of college coaches in the last year, especially, but in recent months, and a couple of them have talked to you, I think, as well. But what role will college coaches have going forward as the age of the kids in your program get a little bit older? But what role will college coaches have in this?
Well, I mean, all of our all of our best players will end up playing for them, and then in not too many years we'll have players who are in the program as a high level amateur who play for them, and so it'll be very similar. One thing we have to be really certain of is NCAA rules and the kind of ways that we'll be able to interact, and kind of collaborate. It's one thing to say we're going to collaborate with their instructors because there's nothing that would stand in the way of that. But as a former coach, I know that there are rules around how many coaches a
Oh,
player
okay.
can have, and then the kind of collaboration that can take place between those coaches. And so those are the things that we're going to have to iron out first. But it'll be, and we spoke at the national, the coaches conventions, and really tried to make sure that coaches understood where we were coming from, and the fact that we have no intention of upsetting the apple cart in very much the same way that the national federations don't. There was I could just tell you, I hated when my players were gone for any kind of competition because they were at another competition like that. And so I will be as sensitive as ever to that because I felt so undermanned. If I had my two guy was at God knows where, and probably playing in a great event, and usually they are. Maybe it was the Asian Pacific Amateur or something, but it's no fun to be out there competing without your best. And so
Oh,
we're going to be really sensitive to that when it comes to scheduling practice, competition, and we're going to, we understand that college golf plays a vital role in their development, and so just like the Swedes do, we're going to pick and choose our ways to be involved, and hopefully, they'll bring habits that maybe they learned in the program as a junior golfer and bring them to that level. But like I said, the first thing that I'm trying to figure out for sure is the level at which we can put our heads together when we have a young player who goes to college, and how much collaboration can take place between our staff and the coaching staffs.
yeah, good. So golf historically has kind of been more of an independent sport as compared to basketball or football or baseball or what have you. And the way that players are learning about their swing, practice routine, rules, core strategy, what have you, in some cases is stuff they learn on their own. They get advice from other players at the club or their parents or what have you.
Or YouTube.
YouTube. Why is this holding back players, and what can you
Um,
offer,
you know,
for those
it's a
players
great.
that are kind of out there on their own but want to, other than ones that are in your program, is there something that can down the road that can you
Well,
can offer them?
well, hopefully, I mean, my intent is to make to 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 do as much as possible to push young golfers to defining their games by performance data rather than um, what it looks like, um, whatever the fundamentals are of the day.
Yeah,
Um, you know, to not be sidetracked by things that don't add to the bottom line, which is performance. And so, to be able to, I had a lot of occasions where, and the data helped me a lot when I coached to be able to leverage the data into um, helping young players make good decisions about what they were going to do with a certain part of their game. But it didn't always prevent them from searching, and it unfortunately didn't always prevent them from working on things that worked really really well, and
yeah,
eventually breaking them. And so, the hope would be that, to, if it eventually, when it gets, or if it gets worked out where we can provide young people with the ability to test different parts of their games, it'll just be a way to um, give them feedback, to and we want to collaborate with everyone who's helping, but let's face it, there's some people are better at it than others at
yeah.
helping. And so in the end, the real determiner of whether or not um, a relationship is going well is if the results are good, or if the results are improving. And so we want to give them a means to be able to measure that. And most people measure it just by what you shoot, right? What do you
Yep.
go shoot when you play? But let's face it, not all courses are the same. Not all days are the same. Not all weather is the
Yep.
same. And so the course can be, it's usually the place to find out, but it's not always the best place to find out. And so if we can start providing them a way to measure, okay, how am I hitting it? How am I hitting it is not necessarily what you shoot. Um, it's closely related, but not always related. And so if we can measure how you're hitting it by simply how you're hitting it, that would be a step in the right direction. And so that's what I'd like to do. I mean, that's kind of how things evolved for me as a college coach, and to really train myself um, to avoid making judgment until I saw what the performance was, rather than just kind of what it looked like to me.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, there's so many biases that I've developed over the years. Somebody's hitting it really hard, I'm really in already. And it's like, well, even solid contact isn't necessarily the best indicator of ball striking skill. And so um, that's what I'd like to see, is that things get pushed a lot more towards performance and less on change for the sake of change. The story I always tell is I had a player go get a lesson, and I said, "How was your lesson?" This was somebody when I was coaching the C, and I said, "How was your lesson?" "Oh, it's great." I said, "What'd you work on?" "Oh, I'm trying to swing more around, a lot more around with my club." And I said, "Well, what was the issue with your shots that you were trying to fix?" And he said, "Nothing. My shots were great." I said, "Well, that's the kind of thinking I'd like to see changed. You know, if you're
Well,
getting it
you
online, that's a good swing. If you're not getting it online, that swing's not working." That's how you answer those questions, not by shooting video.
well, and you and I talked about this last month too, was kids going to their instructor and telling the instructor what they want to work on rather than the instructor telling them what they should work on.
Right.
That kind of
Right.
dynamic it seems a little backwards in golf. There's not a lot of other sports that
That
work
go
that
that
way.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing we talked about, if I recall, is that, just because somebody shows up for a lesson and says something in their game needs work doesn't necessarily mean it
Mhm.
needs work, And so I think it's really important that the people who are in those positions to help answer that question first, and not just take the word of this 15-year-old golfer who is fairly new to golf, or even if they're really good, they're still really young. And so for them to be the sole arbiter of where a certain place in their, or a certain part of their game is something that I learned to take great care with. When to really, before I said anything, is to see what how they performed, and
Yeah.
then and that would help answer the question: does this need work or doesn't it need work? Because everyone's going to hit a bad shot, or three or four, and what they end up doing is using that shot as the proof that they need to change. But it's if everybody's going to hit some bad shots, that means even the best ball strikers will. And so just hitting a bad shot or a handful of bad shots is not necessarily a reason to change. I mean, nobody's dispersion is 2 yards in radius. It's usually from 200 yards. A good player's dispersion is 20 yards wide,
Yeah.
and so understanding the standards might help. Those are things we can do to help, right? Give them an idea,
Expectation
like,
management.
yeah, just so you hit it almost as well as you can. A ball can be hit, so hopefully you're not going to look to that part of your game to get to the next level, or to improve. Like, that's not where we're going to find this.
Yeah. What so short term, next 6 to 12 months, what do you hope to accomplish?
Well, we'll have this team picked. We are going to I'm hoping to get in front of these kids. My goal right now is, and it might not be doable, but I'd like to try and see each player like once every 2 months. Um, and so at the size of the team now, it might be doable. As soon as this team gets bigger, it won't be, but hopefully at that point we'll have some things in place that will allow us to do more remotely. But my goal is to figure out how to take these 8 players on the boys side and 8 on the girls side, and somehow get them better at golf. Those are my goals. And to we're going to schedule some competitions. We're hoping to play a match against Australia in early July, at some sort of a really great club on the East Coast, of the U.S. and then hopefully find other competitions to bring some players to. But really, my goal is kind of the same goals that I had as a college coach, which is to look at the group of players and figure out with each player what could add to where they are now. And it could be all kinds of different things, but trying to identify those and do nothing but help is my
Yeah.
goal.
It's a very, very exciting program for you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
Let me put a screen up here with contact.
Great.
You had two places to, or here's a website. You can at least start, and then I'll take you some information, usga.org/national program. And then if you had questions, you can send it to this email, right?
Yeah.
USNDP@usga.org.
So remember, for those who want to send a resume, go into the website address there, and then go to the resources section. And then when you're in the resources section of the national program page, go to the golf resume section and use that resume to fill out.
Man, this is an exciting time for junior golf, especially.
Yeah, it's cool. It's golf's popular right now, and for a variety of reasons. COVID was really helpful, it looks like,
Very helpful. Yeah.
in bringing players to golf. And so, yeah, like I was saying, and I've said many times on this call, like, we just want to help. We want to make a difference. If we never existed, we would be okay. We might even be great in some ways, but we want to do. We want to take the next step and just not make it a free for all. Every other sport in our country does it. just about every other country in the world has a golf federation, and so we're ready to take this on.
Well, I thank you for your time. We wish you all the best with the new program. The USGA is extremely fortunate, in my opinion, to have you leading this program, the U.S.
Thanks,
National
Peter.
Development Program.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing more about the program as it expands over the years. And you're welcome to come back anytime and talk about more
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. Just let me know.
All right, good.
Okay, buddy.